you should know about me is that I am a nerd. And whenever I hear about something kind of cool, like a philosophy or some kind of system, I always ask myself, can this be applied to sex? Go back and watch my video on the golden ratio if you're not convinced of my nerdiness. And I'm coming with another nerdy proposition for you today, and I think you're gonna love it. I learned recently that there are 7 principles of design, and that they are the foundation of sort of creativity. So this is interior design, this is poster and graphic and even like website design, and that there are principles that guide all quality design. This probably isn't that much of a surprise to you, whether or not you've ever studied design. You're gonna be familiar with these things. But as soon as I heard this, I thought, I bet we can apply that to sex. And I was right. And in this video today, I'm going to explain to you how the 7 core principles of design, balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, proportion, and unity, that guide all of the arrangements of elements in a composition can be applied to your sex life. And I mean this in designing your ideal sex life, both in like an overall kind of like the sex life as a whole, and an individual encounter between you and your lover. These principles are cool because they ensure a sort of visual harmony, right? They make sure that design is effective, that it works, right? You see them in art, in architecture. They create pleasing and functional spaces. By understanding how these design principles shape a visual medium, we can actually understand how they can enhance our experience in sex. So let's get into it. Without further ado, let's start. Number 1, balance. Now, in design, balance means that things are distributed evenly. Symmetrical design, like a perfectly centered logo, can feel stable, and asymmetrical layouts, like a web page with text and images that are offset, not in the center, can create dynamic interest. In sex and relationships, balance reflects an equitable give and take. For example, alternating roles of giving and receiving pleasure in a single session, which ensures mutual fulfillment. Or we can decide that we're not going to be balanced in this session, and we're going to have asymmetrical, where one person is giving and one person is receiving. But either way, engaging with that intentionally is going to create a variety of different experiences between you and your lover. Number 2, contrast. In design, contrast uses opposites to highlight differences, such as dark text on a light background or a soft and scripty font with a big bold font. In sex and relationships, contrast adds variety and excitement. Think about contrast like a lot of sensation and then 0 sensation. Think about it like tender, gentle caresses paired with the nastiest, freakiest shit anyone ever said to you whispered in your ear. The contrast of like soft and gentle plus like freaky kinky is delightful. Or you could think about contrast like having a super hot, adventurous date and then pairing that with like a very cozy evening together afterward. All right, number 3, emphasis. In design, emphasis draws attention to focal points, like the kind of typography that you use for a headline, while keeping other text subdued, like it tells your eyes where to go on the page. In sex and relationships, emphasis spotlights desires or key areas of connection. So think about focusing on one erogenous zone. You might touch all over their body, but then you put a lot of emphasis on the clit. Or the emphasis could be on a particular fantasy that you're exploring together, that you're putting your attention on and building into this individual session. In a greater relationship, emphasis could mean your date night, the way that you balance all of the things that you have going on in your life between work and your family, but then you emphasize one night out of the week or one night out of the month on just intimacy and just connection. This is something you're probably, hopefully, already doing. Number 4, movement. In design, movement guides the viewer's eyes. Curved lines, things that create shapes that let our eyes know in which order and where to go next. In sex and relationship, movement reflects the flow of intimacy, right? The movement is what we are doing most of the time that we are intimate with our partner. Think about the way that you might begin a session with really light touches and progress to lovemaking and then conclude with aftercare. Thinking about how your energy and your attention moves throughout the entire session is a really great way to think about from start to finish what kind of experience you want to create with your lover. Number 5, pattern or repetition. In design, pattern means using repeated shapes or colors or motifs to create a rhythm. Think about like chevron wallpaper or polka dots. These are consistent elements, right? When I think about pattern in sex, I really think about thrusting. I think about the way that you are moving your body in a rhythmic, in a tempo, in a repeated way to create the kind of sensation that you want your lover to experience. And if you are curious about thrusting, or you think that you could be doing a better job with knowing when and how to thrust in various positions and to create different kinds of orgasms, then you have got to check out my masterclass on thrusting and positions, because in it I break down all of the do's and don'ts of thrusting to make sure that you are not just creating pleasure, but that you're actually thinking about, okay, in this position, I need to thrust in this way in order to build her up, in order to have this kind of orgasm. If you are a sex geek like me, this is one of the core and most important elements to creating a great sex session, and yet is one of the things that we think about the least. Anything that is a repeating rhythm during intimacy is part of how we create movement inside of that session. And yeah, if you want to be legendary in bed, you've got to get thrusting and positions right. They kind of seem straightforward, and I promise you, just like great interior design, they're not. Learn from the pros. Number 6, proportion. In design, proportion ensures that size relationships feel right, like a balanced ratio between text and image, or the size of the couch and the size of the coffee table, right? In sex and relationships, proportion is more about time and space. So that means more about spending adequate time on foreplay, building up to climax, and creating time for aftercare. Again, see my other extremely nerdy, geeky video on the golden ratio, which is essentially all about the proportion of where climax and where the height of your sexual experience together should fall in the overall timeline. And that brings me to number 7, unity. In design, unity ensures that all of the elements work together harmoniously, like a cohesive color palette that exists across a room or across a website. And in sex, unity means tying the emotional, physical, mental, sexual, and relational aspects into a seamless connection. When our heart, our mind, and our body are all on the same page, all aligned, and when they are aligned with our partner, that is when magic really happens. If you've ever had an experience of like your mind is over here, but your body's over here, and your heart is in some third location or totally absent, you know it's really hard to be really present. What is it about a great sex session? If you think about the best sex you've ever had in your life, I guarantee your mind, your heart, your body were all on the same page. They were all expressing the same thing, and your partners were also all on the same page expressing the same thing, and then those two things came together. There are so many elements that go into creating great sex. It is not just about genitals, orgasms, etc. There is an infinite number of things that you could think about or introduce or be purposeful and intentional about inside of a session that make it really memorable, that make it really powerful, pleasurable, and unforgettable. And like I said earlier, one of the things that most often gets forgotten inside of that, or ends up kind of being an afterthought, is thrusting and positions. You may have your favorite positions, your go-to positions, the ones that are most likely to create orgasm. But when's the last time that you made some small tweaks and changes to those positions that allowed you to stay in them for longer, hit different parts of your bodies in order to create different kinds of sensations, or created the kind of novelty that is necessary in order to spice things up and get us out of our routines and back into pleasure and explosiveness and orgasms that are beyond what we have gotten used to experiencing. So check out my course. Tell me in the comments below what you think about applying design theory to your sex life, and what of these 7 things is your sex life lacking? Where could you inject a little bit more contrast or balance or proportion into your bedroom? I'm Caitlin V. Thank you for joining me today. Check out my course below, and I'll see you here next week. Bye.